Hello, Midnights. You are listening to your favorite bedtime stories. Next up, the spiritual surgeon of La Plata, the life and ministry of Father Carlos Mancuso. We hope you enjoy our stories. Let us know where you are listening from, and please consider subscribing to our channel. Thank you. The practice of exorcism, derived from the Greek word exorkizein, meaning to bind by oath, occupies a liminal space in the modern world, balancing on the razor's edge between ancient faith and contemporary psychiatry. It is generally defined as the religious or spiritual practice of evicting demons, or malevolent entities from a person or place believed to be possessed. In the strict canonical context of the Catholic Church, this is not a superstitious remnant of the Middle Ages, but a highly regulated sacramental, a sacred sign instituted by the Church to sanctify different circumstances of life. The Church's teaching, rooted in the Gospels where Jesus frequently expelled demons, distinguishes clearly between the kingdom of God and the kingdom of Satan. The Catechism is explicit. The goal of exorcism is the expulsion of demons or the liberation from demonic possession through the spiritual authority which Jesus entrusted to his Church. Crucially, the Church teaches that Satan is not merely a symbol of evil or a psychological abstract, but a real, personal, spiritual entity, a fallen angel who retains a terrifying intellect and will, yet remains a creature ultimately subordinate to God. However, the Church treats this ministry with extreme judicial caution. Codified in the Praenotanda, the introduction of the Roman ritual. This document acts as a binding legal and spiritual framework for every exorcist. It outlines that major exorcism is a liturgical rite that can only be performed by a priest who is endowed with piety, knowledge, prudence, and integrity of life. The Church strictly divides spiritual affliction into categories: obsession, mental, torment, oppression, physical attacks, and possession, full control of the body. The rite is not magic. Its efficacy depends not just on the words spoken, but on the faith of the Church, ex opere operantis ecclesiae, and the holiness of the priest. This is why the revision of the rite, de exorcismis et supplicationibus quibustum, shifted focus slightly from direct confrontation to stronger prayers of supplication to God, although many traditionalists, including Mancuso, argued the older forms were more effective in direct combat. For over 30 years, Father Carlos Alberto Mancuso stood as a titan within this specialized ministry, serving as the official exorcist for the Archdiocese of La Plata, Argentina. His life and work offer a profound case study into the reality of spiritual warfare, operating under a unique methodology that garnered the respect of the Church's highest authorities, including Pope Francis. Father Mancuso, who passed away in 2023 at the age of 89, was not merely a priest, but a specialist in the preternatural, the intermediate realm between the natural and the divine. His path to this ministry was unconventional and marked by intense intellectual preparation. Born in the humble neighborhood of Los Hornos, Mancuso understood that to defeat an enemy, one must understand them. Before his ordination in 1962, he spent years reading extensively on esotericism, Umbanda, spiritualism, and Freemasonry. He operated on the principle that in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. By understanding the specific rituals of black magic and occult sects, he possessed the rare ability to diagnose exactly how a person had become afflicted, a diagnostic skill that separated him from many of his contemporaries. This intellectual rigor translated into a ministry defined by skepticism rather than fanaticism. Mancuso operated with a clinical approach to discernment, estimating that out of every 100 people who came to him claiming possession, only about 10 truly required spiritual deliverance. He frequently noted that his primary challenge was not the possessed, but their families, who often refused to accept psychiatric diagnoses for their loved ones. This caution aligns with the strict guidelines of the Code of Canon Law, which mandates that medical and psychological consultations must be performed first to rule out conditions such as schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, or epilepsy. The Church teaches that the exorcist must possess moral certitude, a high degree of certainty, beyond reasonable doubt, that the affliction is demonic before lifting a crucifix. When a case was deemed genuine, Mancuso employed a specific, battle-tested methodology that distinguished his work from Hollywood dramatizations. To discern true possession from mental illness, he utilized a provocation technique, often placing a hidden rosary or relic on a table, or offering the afflicted person holy water disguised as regular water. A violent, adverse reaction to a concealed sacred object served as his primary filter for identifying a preternatural cause. Once engaged, he never worked alone, utilizing a combat team of physically robust laymen whose sole job was to restrain the possessed person to ensure safety. Furthermore, while the Church updated the rite of exorcism in 1999, Mancuso preferred and had permission to use the older ritual of 1615, believing the archaic Latin formulas held a more imperative and commanding force against demonic entities. Specific files from Mancuso's ministry, shared in his memoirs Mano a Mano con el Diablo, illustrate the terrifying reality of these encounters. One foundational case involved a young catechist who began vomiting strange objects and speaking in a guttural voice after being cursed by a sorcerer hired by an ex-boyfriend. When Mancuso entered the room, the entity growled at him to leave, claiming victory over the crucifix. During the grueling ritual, the entity screamed in agony whenever Mancuso looked directly at the woman, confirming the teaching of St. Philip Neri that the devil cannot withstand the gaze of a priest. After hours of prayer, the woman was liberated. In another instance involving a boy from Santiago del Estero who had dabbled in a satanic sect, the physical manifestations were undeniable. The boy exhibited superhuman strength, requiring 5 men to restrain him, and vomited high-density objects like nails and glass which, medically speaking, should have destroyed his internal organs yet left him unharmed. Perhaps the most controversial display of his spiritual authority was the telephone exorcism of a woman named Ana in Chile. Unable to travel, Mancuso instructed her family to hold the receiver to her ear while he recited the Latin prayers. To the shock of traditionalists, the demon reacted violently to the electronic transmission of the priest's voice, proving to Mancuso that spiritual authority transcends physical proximity. Mancuso's work did not exist in a vacuum, but was part of a broader historical tapestry of the Church's battle against evil. His ministry is best understood alongside famous historical cases like that of Roland Doe in 19, which inspired The Exorcist and established the cultural template for possession symptoms. Conversely, the tragic case of Anneliese Michel in 1976, where a young German woman died of malnutrition after 67 exorcism sessions, serves as a grim reminder of the stakes involved. The negligent homicide conviction of the priests in the Michel case critically reinforced the Church's necessity for the extreme caution and medical stability that Mancuso rigorously upheld throughout his career. To fully grasp the gravity of the enemy Mancuso faced, one must look beyond the clinical diagnoses to the most extreme, mind-blowing cases in the Church's archives that defy all physical laws. Among the most harrowing is the 1906 case of Clara Germana Sele in South Africa, a 16-year-old girl who, after making a pact with Satan, demonstrated knowledge of the private sins of those around her and spoke languages she had never learned. Witnesses, including nuns and priests, documented her levitating 5 feet into the air, horizontally and vertically, often resisting the physical strength of several men trying to pull her down. Even more chilling to modern skeptics is the 2011 case of Latoya Ammons in Gary, Indiana, often referred to as the Demon House case. Unlike historical accounts that rely on religious testimony, this case involved official government reports from the Department of Child Services and local police. A DCS caseworker and a nurse witnessed a 9-year-old boy glide backward up a wall to the ceiling, flipping over his grandmother, a feat of physics that left the officers and medical staff terrified and convinced that the affliction was not merely psychological. Despite such accounts, the ministry of exorcism remains a subject of intense debate. Critics argue that possession is merely a manifestation of severe psychiatric conditions and that rituals act as placebos or, worse, nocebos that exacerbate symptoms through suggestion. The theological response, exemplified by Mancuso, is that exorcism is a last resort employed only when science fails to provide a cause or cure. The Church focuses on verifying phenomena that defy scientific explanation, such as xenoglossy, the ability to speak unlearned languages, or knowledge of hidden things. Culturally, views on this practice vary wildly, while the secular West often dismisses it as archaic superstition. In the global South and among traditional Catholics, priests like Mancuso are viewed as heroic warriors providing a necessary service that medicine cannot offer. The relevance of Mancuso's work has only grown in recent years, evidenced by a dramatic increase in the demand for exorcists. The number of Vatican-certified exorcists in the United States alone grew from 12 in 2005 to over 125 by 2022. Mancuso attributed this rise to specific spiritual mechanics, offering a controversial theological stance on contemporary moral issues. He famously stated that the blood of aborted children opens ancient gates of hell, acting as a ritual summoning that increases the ambient level of demonic activity in the world. His expertise was recognized at the highest levels. Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio, now Pope Francis, maintained a relationship of deep, professional trust with Mancuso during his time as Archbishop of Buenos Aires. Bergoglio utilized a referral system where verified, difficult cases were sent directly to Mancuso in La Plata. In April 2023, shortly before the exorcist's death, Pope Francis mentioned him by name as one of the specialists he relied upon. Father Carlos Mancuso passed away, leaving a legacy that demystified the role of the exorcist, portraying himself not as a magician, but as a spiritual surgeon operating where science stopped, testifying to the belief that the battle between good and evil is a daily, tangible reality. Among the documented cases in his memoirs, Mano a Mano con el Diablo, Hand to Hand with the Devil, the most foundational and illustrative of his methodology, involved a young woman whose affliction was definitively traced back to a black magic curse. This case highlights the terrifying spiritual reality he faced and his unique blend of clinical caution and commanding spiritual authority. The victim was a young catechist, a laywoman dedicated to teaching the Catholic faith, which, ironically, made her a high-value target for a demonic attack. The root cause of her affliction was a sorcerer hired by her ex-boyfriend to enact a curse upon her. This detailed knowledge of the origin was crucial to Mancuso, who believed understanding the gateway used by the demonic was key to closing it. The young woman's initial symptoms manifested not as typical mental illness, but as classic signs of demonic oppression, possession. These included vomiting of foreign objects, a preternatural sign that defies medical explanation, and speaking in a deep, guttural voice, a form of xenoglossy that was clearly not her own. The entity within her even spoke directly to Mancuso, ordering him to leave and claiming victory over the authority of the crucifix. When Mancuso and his combat team entered the room, the confrontation was immediate and intense. Mancuso, who preferred the archaic commanding formulas of the 1615 Roman ritual, began the grueling rite. The entity's response immediately confirmed his diagnosis of true possession, showing both verbal resistance and a powerful aversion to spiritual authority. Despite the demon's initial threats, the critical moment of the exorcism occurred through a far subtler spiritual weapon, the gaze of the priest. The demon screamed in agony and frustration whenever Fr. Mancuso looked directly at the woman. This detail validates the teaching of the 16th century Saint Philip Neri, who held that the devil cannot withstand the direct gaze of a holy priest. To Mancuso, this was not magic, but the tangible effect of the grace and holiness. The ex opere operantis, ecclesiae, the work of the Church's faith through the operator, radiating through the priest's presence. Furthermore, Mancuso always ensured safety during these violent manifestations by utilizing his combat team, physically robust laymen whose job was solely to restrain the possessed woman. The exorcism was not a quick event, but a grueling hours-long battle of wills. Ultimately, after hours of relentless prayer, command, and supplication to God, the young catechist was liberated. This encounter, shared in Mancuso's own accounts, serves as a masterclass in his approach. His intellectual diagnosis, identifying the black magic curse, allowed him to target the specific spiritual gateway. His clinical discernment, the vomiting and xenoglossy, ruled out psychiatric conditions, justifying the major exorcism. The demon's violent reaction to the priest's direct gaze and the Latin commands confirmed his belief that spiritual authority and the sanctity of the priest were paramount to the rite's efficacy. Finally, the use of his combat team underscored his professional caution and commitment to safety protocols. The case of the young catechist was not merely a miracle of deliverance, but a clear, documented example that solidified Mancuso's reputation as a practitioner whose work was rooted in both profound Catholic piety and a rigorous, almost clinical approach to spiritual warfare. It testified to his belief that the battle between the kingdom of God and the kingdom of Satan is a daily, tangible reality that requires a spiritual surgeon who is both highly skilled and morally impeccable. Mancuso's ministry frequently encountered physical manifestations that defied known laws of science and medicine, confirming the preternatural nature of the enemy. In a separate, harrowing case involving a boy from Santiago del Estero who had actively participated in a satanic sect, the physical realities were undeniable and terrifying. Superhuman strength, the boy exhibited such immense, uncharacteristic power that it required 5 grown men from Mancuso's combat team to physically restrain him. This sudden, violent surge in strength is a classic sign, cited in the Church's ritual as an indicator of possession, often referred to as oppression when physical attacks are involved. Vomiting of high-density objects during the ritual, the boy violently expelled high-density foreign objects, specifically nails and glass. Medically, the expulsion and passage of such objects should have resulted in catastrophic internal injuries or organ destruction. Yet, the boy was left unharmed afterward. This phenomenon, the expulsion of uninjurious foreign matter, was, to Mancuso, definitive proof that the affliction was outside the realm of natural physical laws and psychological pathology. While the catechist's case demonstrated the physical reality of demonic combat, Mancuso also demonstrated his belief in the universal, non-spatial nature of spiritual authority with his most controversial act, the telephone exorcism of a woman named Ana in Chile. Due to the distance and the urgency of the case, Mancuso could not travel. Instead, he instructed Ana's family to position the telephone receiver near her ear, while he began to recite the Latin prayers of the major exorcism into the phone line. The outcome was definitive. The demon reacted violently to the electronic transmission of the priest's voice. This proved to Mancuso, and became his theological conclusion, that the spiritual authority and the commanding force of the sacred Latin formulas were not bound by the physical limitations of space or electrical signals, but resided in the divine mandate itself. Mancuso's work existed within a larger context of what he perceived as a worldwide increase in demonic activity. He attributed the dramatic rise in the demand for exorcists, with the number of Vatican-certified exorcists in the US alone growing from 12 in 2005 to over 125 by 2022, to specific moral and spiritual mechanics. He offered a controversial theological stance, famously asserting that the blood of aborted children opens ancient gates of hell, acting as a ritual. Summoning that increases the ambient level of demonic activity in the world, requiring an exponential increase in spiritual warfare specialists like himself. This combination of strict clinical caution, battlefield-tested methodology, and a willingness to confront contemporary issues through a spiritual lens is what defined Father Mancuso and secured his legacy as a trusted specialist. Even to his former archbishop, Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio, Pope Francis